Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm here today with Purnendu Mukherjee, who is the CEO of Convai. And Convai is a very interesting company taking AI technology and applying it to gaming, at least as a start. And so, Purnendu, I thought we could just start by having you explain what is it exactly that you're working on? What is Convai? What is the service?
Yeah. So Convey enables human-like uh, abilities for characters in virtual worlds. So now, non-player characters or AI characters in virtual worlds can understand what you're saying, respond back intelligently, and carry out actions in the world, perceive the environment, effectively have their own lives, and engage with you in various manners, can role play anything, and can be used in various kinds of applications, not just games.
AI NPCs, basically.
AI NPCs, yes. Yeah, AI NPCs, AI characters, there are very various terminologies. Yeah, yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit more about you as well in terms of your background and how did you get to wanting to start Convey and working on this problem of AI NPCs?
Yeah, so many things came together for me to start Convey. I would say there are like four or so reasons. The primary one I would say is I had this major bent towards understanding how the human mind works or my brain works effectively. Where I would analyze myself as to how I learned this, why did I react the way I reacted, and that naturally led me into uh, learning about AI in a very early age, like when I was in my high school undergrad. But I was quite disappointed about the state of affairs with AI back then, which was 2009 2010, and mainly because it was very rule based. At least the books that I learned from, and there was no data oriented learning back then, and I realized like we humans don't learn like that. We come with a blank mind, and no matter if a baby is born in China and you let them grow in India, they will pretty much speak Hindi like they were always born there. So like they come with a blank mind and they learn based on data around them, right? And they so like that was not how I was seeing the state of affairs back then. I After my undergrad back in India, I was working at a research lab, and that's where I got introduced to deep learning back in 2015, which struck a chord in me such that whoa, this is exactly how I've been thinking about it, and I went very deep into deep learning, and got me to move to US for my grad school, where I studied all about deep learning, natural language processing, and uh, uh, and did my thesis track on question answering systems. And shortly after graduating, I started at NVIDIA, where I spent the next 4 years primarily focused on natural language processing, conversational AI, which is where I also found and I had a bent towards the kind of things that I wanted to do based on my interest, and that got me into this research group that worked heavily into conversational AI. One of the projects that I did that got a ton of traction internally, and basically Jensen showcased it back in 2020 in GTC, where it was about bringing this. It was NVIDIA's first 3D avatar chatbot, and I got a chance to lead that project from inception. And that is where I learned the pain from a developer standpoint of what are the different set of technologies that you need to bring together to make that happen. And that also connected really closely with how I have been thinking about the human mind and such. So I found the problem, that was really close to my heart, that I wanted to solve, something that I'm happy to spend the next 10, 15 years. And at the same time, I had over the years I've been learning about entrepreneurship. I have done projects before that were with heart and soul, that I wanted to that got me to learn a lot about business, and I wanted to apply that. And I was a big time a competitive gamer back in undergrad, right? So like all of those pieces came together. And I realized that this is something that I would be very happy to work on. That got me to jump for Convey about 2 years ago.
And just to be clear on the progress of this technology, where are we today? And if you were to extrapolate into the far future, like 20 years from now, what would be the difference between what's possible today in terms of AI versus what's possible in the future?
What's possible today with AI in general, or like AI NPCs?
Oh, AI NPCs.
Okay.
Like,
So
more specifically, what are the current
right,
limitations such that if I'm talking to an AI NPC, I would not be able to distinguish the NPC from another real person, for example?
right. Okay. So the main limitation as of absolutely today, both the current state of the art as well as in our platform today, primarily would be voices. So what are the different levels? Voices, animations, fidelity of characters. These are kind of like the main aspects that will tell you that, oh yeah, it's not fully human. But so like for example, if you do text in, text out, it is going to take you a while before you realize this is not a real human. If you adjust the typing speed and everything, you do that, and you talk to the latest large language model, crafted properly with the right prompts, it will be hard for you to tell if this is not human or not. The moment you add a voice layer on top of it, now it's voice in, voice out. Excuse me. um, then it becomes um, you know uh, uh, a little more obvious, because the voice may not have the right pauses, the inflections, the natural inflections that we make, the emotive inflections. There's a lot of progress happening over the last few months and last 1 year, which is getting there, but it's still a way to go to solve that fully. And then, especially when you do the embodiment aspect of it, meaning you give it a face and a body, then it has to have the human mind, or any animal nature or living beings have been trained to observe the facial changes in a very, very, very minute manner, right? And those things need to be done right if we are shooting for a high fidelity embodied character. And those are areas that we need to improve effectively to cross the uncanny valley, right? That people notice. And the reason people notice uncanny valley is because our minds are trained to capture those micro expressions and changes. And so those are the two main things um, to start with, like within 3D characters and avatars. But then there are more things, like, as you go deeper and deeper into it, like, is this character aware of its surrounding? Is this AI character able to move around in the world naturally, just like a human would? And things like various other things, basically.
And when I tried your demo during GDC, which, by the way, I thought was very interesting and cool, I did think that the one thing for
Hmm.
me that seemed a little bit of a barrier in terms of really buying into the AI NPC character was just the that kind of like 2 to 3 second delay. Like I would say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then the AI
Hmm.
NPC would be like 1, 2, 3, and then there'd be a
Yeah.
response. What is the cause of that delay? And is it possible to speed up?
Yeah, I think.
And what do you think is required to
Yeah,
overcome
so I
that?
would say those could be related to more setup scenarios and voice qualities and whatnot. If you see some of our demos, not all of the demos, the for example, the one we did with Nvidia that
Okay.
Jensen showcased as well back in 19 months ago, the delay was very, very minimal. And even today there are a bunch of our demos. The the difference happens if we are
Yeah.
using a higher quality voice model,
Mhm.
higher quality facial expressions, and
Okay.
those additions add up, right, in terms of the latency. And then there could be many factors regarding the location, the internet capacity, the latency, the of
Okay.
the internet itself, and various other things. However, assuming those are um, and also like how complex the character is, in terms of how much does it know in the knowledge, how much does it have a narrative structure or guard railing and things like that. The more you add to it, the latency increases. But in theory, we could have a very snappy response time, basically, for most cases, if we
Yeah.
optimize for it. So I would say the latency problem is not fully solved, but it can be addressed to a large extent.
And I wanted to now ask you more about specific application areas and how AI could potentially more generally be applied to different applications in gaming. So many years ago, I think it was around 2015
Hmm.
or so, I actually met Ray Kurzweil at an AI conference, and I asked him, what is the first application area that AI is going to have a major impact in? And he actually kind of got upset. He like looked at me with
Mm-hmm.
this kind of intense stare, and he said, everything. It's going to impact everything. And then he just turned around and
Yeah,
stormed
yeah.
off. But if we were to speculate on specific near term application areas, and it does seem, for whatever reason, that there does seem to be a fairly significant focus of
Mm-hmm.
AI technology being targeted towards gaming. And even for your specific application area, let's call it AI NPCs just as a shorthand, why do you think that if we look at funding activities,
Mm-hmm.
there's you guys also enrolled, but as far as the amount of funding
Mm-hmm.
going into this specific application area, why do you think people are more excited about this space that you guys are going after relative to the other ones? And then maybe you can even talk about some of the other application areas that you think might gain more early traction.
Yeah. So I th- I think it has to do with uh, traction quite a bit. Like I think your question boils down to like what distinguishes us, versus like new players versus is that what you're shooting for, or?
Well, what I'm saying is that when I look at the AI space generally, right? So I see a lot of AI
Mm-hmm.
technology being targeted to many kinds of applications, but certainly in gaming as well as a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
focus, which is great. And then within gaming, you see AI applied to different things like generating 3D models based upon 2D sketches, or
Mm.
generating character animations based upon AI, or even animations
Mm.
based upon text or speech prompts. And then there's all sorts of
I
different
see.
applications in gaming you could apply AI to.
Right.
But when I look at funding, it
Right.
seems like your area is one of the areas that, at least
Mm.
from an investor perspective, there's a lot of excitement around. So, why this AI NPC
Yeah.
application versus other application areas that AI potentially could
Right.
be applied to?
Sure. So, okay, I see. I think the what it has to have is probably the potential impact and thereby the market size. So, what Convey is doing, for example, is not just solving for games. I mean, it is our target domain, right? But if we solve the problem of these embodied AI character in virtual worlds, it solves or effectively uh, almost like everything that a human
Yeah.
can do in a virtual world. So not only is it all kinds of games, right, role playing games, or like MMOs, or take any kind of games where either today it's a scripted AI or even a multiplayer human like world. Those kind of uh, uh, places, this AI NPC can definitely uh, play there, right, or act there. But it also opens up everything else when it comes to servicing uh, like brand agents, or learning and training, or education characters that can be your mentor, can teach you in all kinds of sectors, all kinds of industries, and even real world cases where if you have this very realistic high fidelity character, in 3D, that could affect, and that could have a conversation, communicate. It could be applied in real world use cases as well, all the way take like any information agent kind of scenario, whether it's talking about a certain set of product inside stores, or giving you general information direction in malls, in airports, or take anything, right? So all of these cases, these AI characters can, or embodied AI characters can have a huge impact. So it's the market size, I would say, that allows probably for higher funding in this space, versus developer tools where you have developed it, and that's it. That was the lifetime of the use for a particular game or asset and whatnot. So that would purely be a developer tool. In our case, while it is a developer tool, it is focused on developers. But when developers go to production with it, it 1000x's the usage for our service, right? Like if it's one or two developers developing that game, when it's played and it's going to production, thousands of end users play it and they are calling our services, right? So basically that is an area where the life cycle of our usage for that particular developer for that game doesn't end during development process. It goes into the runtime process as well, which kind of separates us from most developer tools, and thereby the possibilities of what that can happen, all the way to things like Westworld and free guy kind of scenario is possible with our tools, to like real world use cases like learning and training, brand agents, and various other
It
things.
kind of sounds like there's optionality and the potential, if you kind of get this right, in terms of gaming as the initial beachhead, you'd then be able to kind of like go from there.
No, I would say it's kind of like opposite actually. So the reason is like we
Okay.
target gaming because that is the superset of all features that is necessary, and also gaming has the most discriminative of audiences. It's the most hardest one as well, where it comes to like it has to be perfect from a quality standpoint, has to be low cost enough, like the
Okay.
constraints are much higher within gaming. And also the aspect of innovation of things that you can do, and the amount of usage it can have is also higher. But if you solve for that, solving for education applications, solving for brand agents is much easier. It's much easier. Yeah. Yeah.
And if I were to think about, and certainly if you were to look at the players entering the space right now, I've seen you, I also recorded a podcast with Kylan from Inworld, but if you were to think about the players coming into this space, and if as a developer trying to understand the differences in terms of approach or business model or things of that nature, how should we be thinking about Convey or Enrolled or any other player in the
Hmm.
market? And you don't have to talk about that specifically,
Hmm.
but could you talk about whether you are all trying to do the same thing with a similar approach? Or what are the different ways in which you could think about the differences in terms of the basis of competition or the way in which you guys are approaching this problem
Hmm.
differently? Or maybe it is pretty similar in approach.
Um, I cannot talk to the plans of competitors. We primarily listen to our users, developers, our end audiences, and get feedback. And I think uh, in terms of what is our focus, I can tell you that. So for example, the number one focus for us is developers. We want to be known as the uh, earth's most developer centric company. So like taking inspiration from Jeff Bezos. So basically so that's what it is, in terms of having great developer experience, like consistently listening to them and iterating. So that's number one. Number two is a deep focus for 3D. So everything that we do, everything we integrate, we look from the lens of how this will apply in 3D worlds, right? So the aspects of embodiment is very important from a 3D avatar aspect of it, but also at the same time, how would this particular AI character effectively have a life of its own? Like they will interact with other AI characters, they will interact with the environment around them, they will engage in actions seen, they will perceive the environment and carry out actions based on their conversations with the end user or another AI. So maybe they will plan their day, they will need to change their plan in the middle of the day based on interactions, and eventually their personalities will shape based on their interactions with users, or relationship with users, and they will have memories and things like that. So those are some of the things that we do that involves being in a 3D environment very deeply, and it connects with what I was saying about my, how why I started Convey in the first place, where like it's important to have that 3D grounding, very importantly. So those, you could say, are kind of like our, all the features that we do, how we do it, how we craft it, has a bent towards these actions and perception of the 3D environment. Of course, making the platform number one for developers.
Cool. And maybe just for our audience, because we do have a number of game developers that are part of our audience, could you walk us through? So let's say I wanted to make a game like Cyberpunk with an NPC character, maybe very similar to the NVIDIA demonstration that Jensen had demonstrated. Could you walk us through the process of integrating your technology? What are the specific steps required from steps one through whatever, one through five, one through 10? What does a developer do? How do they work with you? And I would assume most people in gaming are probably using Unity or Unreal. So, how do they get that into the engine and what does that look like?
So basically, there are three steps, and then we are going toward the fourth now. But the three steps are this: you craft the mind of the character, right? Where you decide what is their backstory, how do they sound like, what kind of personality they have, what kind of knowledge they should have, like what are the areas they can or cannot talk about, do they need to follow a certain narrative. You decide all of that when crafting the character's mind.
Craft, is this a text document or just like a description or is it something else?
Yeah, it's basically our playground, like where you effectively write the backstory. You choose the personality with the different knobs that is there. You provide example sentences of how they will say. You craft the narrative, which is kind of like a state machine with that flows, from node to node. So basically, these are all the tools that, and you don't need to have any prior knowledge for doing this, right? So you craft the mind of the character. Now that you have this particular mind through which you can have a voice in, voice out conversation, now you need to take that mind and embody that within an avatar, right, of your choice. We support most popular avatar systems, and we ourselves are avatar agnostic. So you can connect it with a meta human, Ready Player Me, Reolution character, or a custom avatar, any kind that you want. And now our APIs drive the facial expression, the lip sync, the hand gestures, all of those while talking, right? Like while it's listening, idle animations, and it's responding with all of that animations playing at the same time, driven by our APIs. So basically, that's why I'm calling it an embodiment aspect. So once that is done, once this embodiment is done, the third step is giving this avatar the ability to perceive the environment around them and carry out actions. So now, if you remember that the one that we did with Nvidia, the second version of it, there were characters, this Jin and Nova character. You could tell them, like, can you get me a ramen, or can you, turn down the light, or give me your favorite drink, or things like that, or take me to your lab or something. They will do those things. Not only just will they say respond, but they will carry out those actions. So our APIs are automatically able to connect with all of your available actions, or available animations that you have, and apply them intelligently, right, based on the response of the character, and execute them, right. So all of those things um, are applied, like automatically. So like that's kind of like giving these characters the ability to not only respond in interesting ways, but actually take action. Like the what you say and do has consequences, right? From a conversation standpoint, like if you ideally enrage them, or they may attack you, or if you're nice to them, they will show you a certain location, or maybe they are programmed to be your escort, so they will take you from location to location and give you a tour, or escort you out of a situation. So that we created a couple of the demos that had these functionalities. So you could do all of those things next. Now where we are going is effectively having many many characters in the environment, each of them having their own plans and executions and interacting with each other, effectively like a simulation kind of scenario, and being able to uh, be in a scenario where there are many characters talking and engaging, and the AI character has to pick and choose what and when they should respond. Basically, that is like a kind of like a group discussion dynamic is a new and interesting problem that we are helping solve.
And so that's great. And when you think about doing that today, because
Mm-hmm.
NPCs in games exist today, and it's generally executed through some type of approach using a dialogue tree of some kind, right? And so if you were to kind of characterize the effort, cost, complexity of using a dialogue tree to try and develop an NPC character versus using the AI approach, how would you compare
Mm-hmm.
those two approaches?
So those there are two things there. One is the dialogue tree aspect of it, and then there is the behavior tree aspect of it, right? So traditional dialogue trees are, you approach a character, the character may say something, and you have like 3 or 4 options on the screen that you can choose of what to say, and you choose that, and the character will say something else, and then you will be given another set of 3 or 4 responses that you can do. So effectively, it's like there is a node which has 4 options that you can choose, and each of those nodes has another set of options. It's kind of like a tree there, right? That you are navigating the whole flow, which is fun and nice, but like it still doesn't give you the ability to explore alternative scenarios of than the options that are presented, right? So these open-ended conversations, especially what we did with narrative design, can still like the good thing about the dialogue trees is that it can have a certain set of outcomes of where the conversation can end or lead to, no matter which options you choose. The problem with open-ended conversation is that if you're not going into these tracks or outcomes, it can go on forever without coming to a certain outcome. What we can effectively, with this new feature that we did called narrative design, you can combine the control of a dialogue tree in terms of the outcome with the open-ended nature of these large language models in terms of being able to go deeper into the mind of the narrative writer, right? So and understand the character even more deeply. So there is that aspect of it, that you can combine those, and the character m- will be able to go to certain extent into certain topics, or lore of the world and such that you are interested in. But it can, if it has an objective and an agenda, it will pull you back to what it needs to do, where you need to go, so it'll get you back on topic. And so that's kind of like the interesting part. The other aspect that you mentioned is behavior trees. Now behavior trees are more important for the actions and animations that the character may take when you said something, or did a certain action. The character needs to react in a certain way. So each of these, effectively, let's say the dialogue tree that you had, which is a very equivalent to our narrative tree, can can effectively have their own behavior trees effectively. So basically, the character can respond to what you are saying through actions and animations, and doing certain thing in the world as well. So basically, it's kind of like a state machine. The dialogue tree or dialogue graph or narrative graph in our case could be effectively like a state machine, that each of those nodes are having their own behavior trees, right? So it allows for open-ended conversation, and yet connects with the animations and actions that the character can take.
Right. And so it sounds like on the dialogue side, a dialogue tree is very fixed and kind of limited in terms of the interactions you can have with the NPC.
Hmm.
But with your approach at Convey, it'd be more open ended. And using your new tool, you can actually drive
Yeah.
towards certain outcomes or things like that. And on the dialogue tree side, it sounds like, well, I would say that for some games like Call of Duty, for example, you've got full time dedicated AI people doing these dialogue and behavior trees, like dedicated people. But maybe with your technology, if you just kind of set your knobs and put in the context of the backgrounds of characters and possibly desired range of
Hmm.
actions, maybe the effort is potentially dramatically less. Is that a
Um,
fair characterization?
yes, depends on the kind of character that you're making. If it's a lead character, main character, you still want to ensure that it's still staying within the bounds of what you're doing, and it's carrying out the objectives. For a, for effort to impact ratio, if you are shooting for that, the amount of effort that you need to have like a one liner npc to having an open-ended npc. So the effort is pretty much the same. That has doesn't have much impact to the story, but you can chit chat with this side character. The effort is pretty much the same, yet the impact is significantly higher. For the main characters, it's I would say you would anyway need to today put a lot of effort, and you still need to put a lot of effort in terms of their animations, in terms of their narrative flow and whatnot. But the experience is just like next level. You feel like this character is alive, in terms of um, its intelligence and interactivity, when you're giving it curveballs after curveballs in terms of conversation, reactions, and it's understanding what you're doing, and responding in an intelligent manner. So depends on what you're trying to do. uh, I would say it may keep the effort level more or less the same, in terms of the development process, but the impact is basically 10 to 100x higher from a gameplay perspective.
Yeah, I guess it would be
Yeah,
difficult to get, even with AI, to get the kind of behaviors that would be specifically appropriate for a character in terms of the specific kind of personality that you have in mind and specific kinds of actions. And for the actions not to be
right,
bad, where actions and dialogue are safe. Like,
right.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
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 exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, so and basically uh the reason is that it's like the amount of animations the character would need, you still need to connect it with the rest, like the system. And the most important reason, the reason it's not less effort, is because you have to test it quite thoroughly. Here you only had so many limited set of things that you knew that it would do and thereby test. Here there is effectively infinite things it can do. So we created this test framework actually that can help you as the developer or designer of the game gain the necessary confidence that yes, it is responding correctly. No matter what I do or what crazy places I take it, it still stays with its character, still stays within the lore, says the right things, has the correct knowledge, does the right animations. So you can test it within this test framework and gain the necessary confidence to ship it to production. So because of this requirement of extra testing, I would say the effort is not less today, but the impact that it can have in the during the gameplay time is just at another level, basically.
I want to now talk
Yeah.
about the economics and the business model because as a
Hmm.
developer working in a mobile free to play, cost can be a major factor and it can oftentimes make or break a game in many situations. So there could be a number of ways, given that you guys have a new technology, that you could potentially charge your customers. So I was wondering if you could speak to the economics today in the business model of how you plan to charge. And I think game developers would be interested in terms of the two models: free to play, where you've got an ongoing live service and how you would charge for that. And then for a
Hmm.
premium game, if I were to make a game like Cyberpunk with a one time single purchase, do you think of different pricing models for those two,
Yeah.
or what do you do?
So you as the developer are in control of it, right? Based on your economics. In terms of the underlying costs of what it takes to run such a system, right? So effectively, we are running somewhere between 5 to 6 GPUs minimum for all of the pieces to work. So like there's the large language model, there's that could take anywhere between 1 to 4 GPUs, right? There is the or you could say like you could call an external service like OpenAI's models, like assuming you have fine tuned them enough to stay in character and do all the things that you need to do. Um, and then there is the voice input service, which is relatively pretty less cost, the speech to text. Then there's the text to speech service, like if you want really high quality voices from an emotive standpoint. And then there is all the animations it needs to do all the way from lip sync, facial expression, hand gestures, and all of them needs to be kind of almost real time generated because of the possible variations of it, right? So there needs to be some models, deep learning models that are executing for that, and potentially, and this goes into the LLM side of things as well, which is scene perception and actions, which may require a larger context input, in terms of the number of tokens. So effectively, if you and where we keep our pricing is pretty much at cost in terms of how much, if you combine all of these things, okay, how much does it cost to have a 4,000 tokens for, let's say, OpenAI's fine-tuned model? How much does it take for generating a speech, whether it's Azure 11 Labs and whatnot? You combine all of them, and that's kind of like how we came about to the price, basically price point. And we charge it by interaction, meaning you say something or ask something to the character, and the character responds back, voice in, voice out, with animations out, and all of that, right? So why I say it can work with almost all business models is, if you're a free to play, for example, in your case, you could potentially unlock this interactivity. You could give that to, based on your economics, how much you are making per user and whatnot, and how much you can afford to spend per user. You could, let's say, budget 10 interactions that I can give to every player, no matter what. And then beyond that, if you want to unlock more engagement, more interactions, they can buy something, like offer the character a drink or something, and or buy them a gift or some kind of um, some kind of purchase element, basically, and that will unlock some interactions with them. So you can design around this from a free to play standpoint. Subscription based games or battle pass kind of scenario works out perfectly fine. Like if you can budget a few dollars or percent out of that pass, like let's say if somebody's buying $10 per month, you can say, okay, effectively we can spend $3 per person, average out. Some will be power users, some will barely use it, and you could provide them with these interactive characters. Yeah, and then one-time purchase games can also budget it out. Like let's say it's a $30 game, you could budget $5 for that particular user, where they can not only finish the game, but they can play the games like two times over or something, right? And beyond that, they can purchase more interactions. But where I see its best serve is persistent worlds, multiplayer worlds, which are effectively always on kind of scenario, right? There is usually a persistent singular world kind of, or a particular server. Those are places where these AI NPCs can not only just be there serving many people, but also evolve, and like you can see the effects of that character evolving over time. And yeah, like we did the recent deployment with Second Life, where they went live on a small scale in a certain region currently. And these characters are there all the time. You can go and talk to them, and as we add more and more features there, they will start remembering you, and like remember your conversation, potentially have friendship with you and things like that. So yeah, these are like the economics works. And it's today, like with this set of quality, it's today. And uh either the price will remain same and the characters will just become absolutely insane in terms of the conversation quality, the lifelike aspect of it, or if you are fine with today's quality, the price will go down, right? So basically, the that's where we are headed. And the prices are going down drastically. Like 2 years ago, when when I started Convey, the price for what is GPT-4 today was, the price for GPT-3 base model, like Da Vinci, was basically more than what GPT-4 charges, right? Or similar, basically, right? Then in 2 years, that became so old, it's almost deprecated. It's worse than 3.5, right? And 3.5 is one tenth the cost of GPT-4, right? So basically, the cost is reducing by more than 10x, in, I would say, in a year and a half, right? So if you're fine with today's quality, it's a matter of 1 year to 2 years that the price will drop by 10x if you're fine with today's quality, right? And even then, like, if you know your game is going to have this much audience, we can potentially deploy, like, fine-tuned open source models dedicated for your case that reduces the cost drastically, right? That can One thing is development cost, and another thing could be production cost, which we could bring down in a drastic manner for your game, for example.
Can you give me an example of that? So when you say you can bring down the cost dramatically, how would that happen? How would you do that?
Yeah, so, like, if for example, that in a month you would probably have, uh, let's say, 100,000 active users, or concurrent users. Let's say overall you will serve 1 million users, throughout the month, and then each will have at least uh, 20 interactions. So it's like 20 million interactions per month, right? Now we will know that at any given time, when it comes to, if you have, let's say, 100,000 concurrent users, not all of them are speaking at the same time. Probably 5 to 10% are speaking at any given time with the characters. So we need a concurrency of like 5,000, right? 5,000 people that can speak at any given time. We now know that how many GPUs we need to deploy, right? So to maintain that level of concurrency, and that can serve the entire like user base throughout that 20 million interactions for that entire month. Now you can do the math, right? Like, how much can you make with 20 to 20 million interactions, or based on your economics and business model, and what is the cost of deploying those, and you see the difference, right? So basically our goal right now is to make this feasible and prove that this is a order of magnitude better in terms of experience for the end user, and it's engaging, it's fun, and the costs are only going to go down from here.
And I'm here in India, and we just started
Yeah.
a second game project. And I've talked to you about this, Purnendu, but this second game, we're trying to serve the Indian audience. And certainly for the Indian audience, getting support for lower end devices is critical. But getting payers and higher payments in India is also very difficult. And so, how feasible is more of a client oriented solution such that you're not paying per transaction over the cloud versus the current model? And for our audience, I want to explain that we want to create a kind of like an AI girlfriend that you're dating virtually. And so we want players to be able to interface with this AI products. And so even if we were to try and get like 7 to 10 rupees from our players, like how low can we bring the cost down? Or could we make it even client based so that the costs are going to be based on that per transaction model? How do you think about that?
Yeah, which is what I would alluded to in my previous calculation, where uh, at the end of the day, what it'll come down to is concurrency, right? It'll come down to the concurrent people live for your game, that which will give us the ceiling for the amount of deployment that we'll have to do for your certain game, right? And if we could project that well, we could deploy that many hardwares like GPUs effectively, that could set the base costs effectively, right? So and it like, if we really want that future to happen for such AI NPC based environments and games, that is how it will come down to. Basically, we will have our license or whatever margin on top of the hardware, and that will be much lower cost from a or interaction basis. And also, you're not capped by interaction at that point, right? But it'll so happen that since we know this is your target concurrency, or like, we have deployed that GPU, so we have a base level cost that we will have to support or deploy accordingly as you come. So basically, if whether you have 15 million interactions or 20 million interactions, the cost from our side is probably the same. But it's so much worthwhile for you because it's much better than a per interaction model. I think that's where it'll go to in terms of um, when it comes to massive usage across many such games. So where we are at today, we just go with the baseline economics, but we know but those are more like developer cost kind of scenario. When you go to production, and if you're having millions of players on a regular basis, uh, the way it will effectively be, and I think the cost to impact ratio will more than justify itself. Meaning, whatever the end user is paying for, whether they're paying effectively, let's say in Indian rupees equivalent, it is like $100 a month or $500 a month or whatever it is, right? So that they are paying with the experience that they're having daily, they are playing for a couple of hours, let's say, is just outsized, that they're very happy to pay 100 or 200 rupees, per month. The Yeah, so that's kind of like the thesis, and it is well justified from your margin standpoint, as well as overall economic standpoint, where we can get this to.
And I think I forgot to ask you when we were talking about applications, but I also want to ask you about what you're seeing today in terms of what you are seeing from your customers who you're speaking to. You had
Mhm.
mentioned Second Life, for example, but for AI NPCs, what are the specific areas that are starting to be used the most, or where there's the most traction in terms of whether it's the genre of game or specific ways in which the technology is being deployed? What are you seeing today? And then maybe you can also kind of speculate about where you think you might be headed in the future as far as where you think the traction is going to be.
Yeah. So we see a so like I said, like it's very early for gaming, in the sense that it still has this uncanny valley to cross, the voices to be better, the integration to be more robust and well tested and thoroughly tried out. There is yet to have a major breakout level game, that's played by millions of people. That's yet to happen. So I would say gaming is still early. However, from our user base standpoint, or I would say interest standpoint, I would say 50% is still gaming. The other 50% is non-gaming applications, but still pretty much like games. Those are like, like virtual worlds with characters that are like learning and training applications, or like brand avatar use cases, or real world deployment scenarios. So like digital humans. So basically, uh, where we see the traction, I would say within games, it would be MMO worlds like Second Life, right? Like multiplayer worlds like Second Life that can provide, that can help solve various aspects of onboarding, solve aspects like taking or being a tour guide, like a character that can show you around, be a companion character. Those are definitely use cases that we are seeing in games and virtual worlds, within the like social virtual world games, um, and very similar use cases in learning and training applications, and brand avatar use cases. So yeah, like it's kind of like evenly split overall. We But we also see, developers who are developing single player games, and like uh, both multiplayer games that are leveraging, like we have a big indie developer use base, basically, that is actively developing a lot of these projects, and plans to ship to production by later this year.
Okay, the other thing that I think about when it comes to AI, and maybe not necessarily conversational or AI NPCs as we've been speaking about, would be something new because we have a new capability. And I would assume some new kind of game or genre of game will be enabled,
Hmm.
whether it's because of technology like your convey technology or other kinds of AI capabilities that are brought to bear against something in gaming. And if you were to think about that, what do you think would become possible because of
Mhm.
AI in terms of new kind of game or new kind of game experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, anytime you have this open-ended aspect of conversation is just new, right? Like in terms of the end user experience. Now that has to be applied not just for the novelty of it, but where it makes sense from an overall game design aspect, right? So a clear fit is any kind of role-playing game, right? Where you are a certain character that is inhabiting this world along with many other inhabitants. You have to kind of like achieve certain objectives based on what you're playing in the game, and then there may be a set of and usually today it's done by various different kind of people that are playing different personalities, right, like real people, but there might be a certain set of uh, uh, characters that nobody is role playing, so AI could fulfill those, right? And not only that, but let's say yours is a either a PvP game or maybe a collaborative game. You don't have enough players to form the team, so you could have these AI NPCs that you can partner with, collaborate with. So these are definitely areas that people are trying and looking into for application of these AI NPCs. Um, and this and where we see, and which is what I was referring before, is uh, these game worlds being inhabited persistently by these AI NPCs, where it's kind of like the movie Free Guy, where this character you can interact with, like almost like a human player, right? And they can evolve based on their experiences in the game, and their story can evolve, their planning can change, and things like that. So that's where we are going, like almost like a simulation, right? Like each instance of the server that is hosted, let's say it consists of 200 people in a particular server, that 50 of those could be NPCs and 150 could be real people, and those 50, no, whether anybody's there or not, always inhabit that server, right? And live their life effectively. So I think that's definitely where like which is what I saw when I started Convey, bringing full circle back. But these characters can live in a simulation and effectively evolve there, kind of like Westworld, but more appropriately Free Guy.
So when I interviewed Kylan from InWorld, I asked him this question about whether is it possible to do Dungeons and Dragons with this kind of conversational AI technology today? And he seemed to think you could. Would you agree with that? Is it possible for there to be Dungeons and Dragons today with existing technology?
Yeah. So the main challenge is this, right? Um, the fun part about such a game like Dungeons and Dragons is that you could totally create something entirely new, right? Like, or come up with an concept and even have a dialogue or mechanic around that whole new invention that came out of nowhere, right? The challenge of that is about having that in a game is basically the totally new creation aspect is uh, like how do you make that real convincingly, especially if you're going for high fidelity worlds, right? Like now you also need that particular object that you talked about, but not only that, you may need to interact with that object, you may need to animate, generate animations into it. In terms of like, if you create a world that is uh, dreamy enough, or I would say crazy enough, that you could use all kinds of real-time generative aspects of create a new objects, create animations on the fly, and all of that, you could do that. But today as it stands,
I mean, even like paper and pencils Dungeons and Dragons. Is that possible?
oh, paper, yeah. Oh yeah, that is totally possible. I think some startups are already doing that. um, I was thinking more like a realistic AAA 3D world kind of scenario. that would be challenging. But yeah, paper and pencil with a scope, you can totally do it, especially leveraging things like DALI, Midjourney, and like conversation, these multimodal like Gemini Pro and GPT-4 Vision Turbo. You could totally do a lot using that paper or pencil, 100%. The When it comes to 3D worlds, there's a lot more. But what I was wanted to go there is that you can do a subset of that today. Meaning, if you know that you have these, let's say, 1,000 assets or objects that you can only use, and you have, let's say, 2,000 different animations you could use, and this is the scope of your large scope of your map. Now you can think of all the different possibilities, right? Maybe 50 characters are there, so it's the possibilities are still exponential. Number of characters multiplied by number of animations and actions they can take, multiplied by number of objects that they can interact with, multiplied by the different locations or grid in the map they can move to or take these objects to. So that effectively this could become an exponential possibilities of things that they can do and interact and engage in. It is you could say a limited set from that Dungeons and Dragons scenario that you could still have in a very 3D realistic world.
Okay, great. And maybe the last couple of questions I have, and just to shift the focus a little bit, but I'd really love to ask you more questions about your entrepreneurial journey. And by the way, it's not lost on me that you left NVIDIA at a time when NVIDIA had this massive run up. And so certainly the opportunity cost for you to do what you're doing has been very high. But the first question I have is, in terms of your entrepreneurial journey, what have you learned? You mentioned that when you were in college, you didn't spend so much time studying, but you were focused on projects. And there were a bunch of things that you learned. This time around, what are the key lessons that you've learned since starting Convey?
Yeah. So it is. I mean, I loved my work at NVIDIA, and I love the people there, and I still am in close touch with them. And it was quite a jump, but it has paid off so much more than I expected and imagined. And I'm super glad, and I'm that I made that jump. Like it's by far the most transformational last 2 years. Like insane. Like nothing compares. So to give you the brief, yeah, like in experiencing life in general, in terms of like understanding how that you could create a product that thousands, tens of thousands of people are using and dependent on, building their business on it, super excited and grateful. And like I receive these emails every day, like tens of them, that people are so grateful. And like, and so many people like that, these are quite transformational. And people that you're engaged, like who would have thought, like less, like a little over 1.5 years into my startup, I got a chance to showcase with Jensen, like, which is like I'm super grateful to Nvidia for that, right? So and recently Unity's leadership showcased that, and we are working with the largest game studios and their executives and whatnot, uh, and not only just these large and big names, but how it changes, like whether it's a high school student through someone in other side of the world, in every part of the world, that is creating such transformational applications for their community, for their, like in especially in training and education, and like many other places. It's just it feels amazing, that and also learning about the VC world, the finance world, how you just coming up with and basically I have realized that I have a lot more powers than I gave myself credit for, right? In terms of mainly creativity and pushing through, making something happen. So it's a journey of not just uh, experiencing the external world of how society, even like how society works, in a sense, like all the way from the finance world, the VC world, how companies are created, how that changes the behaviors of people around the world, right? How it changes civilization in general. So not only just that part, but a self transformation, self discovery, I would say, like of like realizing, whoa, I am pretty good at this kind of kind of scenario. Like some things, I of course, and also a lot of learning in terms of, like, I was never a manager, like at Nvidia, so I was mainly an independent contributor. But here I became, I mean, I don't call myself a manager, but like these are such exceptional people. Like they just need to know why we are doing what we are doing, what needs to be done, and they can figure it out how to do it. Like I don't have to and that's how we choose people in our company. But the the but effectively, from a responsibility standpoint, now there are like almost 40 people at Convey. And so I became like initially managers of like, or like um like of about 10 or so people in the first year. And then over the last 1 year, it's been like another big increase. So now it's like there's manager of managers. There are like people in the company I don't get to engage with week over week, or month over month even, right? So um and I'm really grateful how they work super hard with their heart and soul, and they're hitting it off the park with the impact that Convey is causing. So truly grateful to the team at Convey.
That all sounds super positive. For me, and the second question I have is like when I started my company 3.5 years ago, it was and has been and is very, very difficult. And just kind of even bringing this back to NVIDIA, Jensen actually had this talk where he kind of became popular for talking about through his entrepreneurial journey, how it's been a lot of pain and suffering. So I wanted to ask for you, has it all been very positive or has there been some amount of pain and suffering?
Big time. But the pain and suffering has been very meaningful, you know like it's also the most brutal time that we are, all of us goes through. But like every waking hour, like since waking up through going to sleep, it's nonstop, right? It's nonstop, like always on like low sleep. Effectively, I try to get sleep, but it's not, there isn't enough time. And yeah, so basically it is very tough, not gonna lie. It is really really hard, but it's a meaningful suffering. Like the suffering is something, and we are suffering towards we are suffering towards something that we believe will have major impact in the world. So effectively, um yeah, you're choosing your battles. We chose one of the hardest battles, like of doing a startup and trying to just survive and like make it worth our while, basically. So the just but we know that as we are doing it, it's changing people's lives in a very meaningful manner, changing people's day to day in a very meaningful manner. So the so it's worth it, like it's very painful, the pain, and it's there. It's a, I would say, I have never by have worked this hard at such a long stretch, especially over the last 1.5 years after coming out of stealth and whatnot. It's pretty darn crazy. But yeah, so like, but it's worth it. You have to, yeah.
Okay, Purnendu, those are all the questions that I have. Now, is there anything that I might have missed or any last message that you have for our audience?
mm, I think you asked pretty much covered everything. The message for the audience, I would say, you know we got a lot of, I would say, constructive criticism over our last release at GDC, and especially those things, like we have been developing for developers primarily of the things that they need. This was one of those times where we got a chance to be in the player's shoes or end audience shoes, and being beside them, where we are showcasing in our demo room. And so lots of journalists tried it out, lots of studio execs and developers tried it out, and we got to hear from them directly as a player, not as a developer, as a player. So and we understood the bottlenecks and pain points. The what I would say is the things that, let's say, like the journalists are criticizing is a matter of when, not if, right? So like that's uh, we know that those are solved problems x months from now, right? So basically, and one thing that I'd like to tell your audience is that we take art and artists very, very seriously. Like, I wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't an aspect of creating great art, right? So we admire and treasure amazing art, and we will ensure that we deliver at the highest of qualities when it comes to artist expectations.
Great. All right, Purnendu, thank you so much for your time and insights and all the information that you've given
Of
us.
course.
And with that, to our audience, we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.